Recorder's on. Hit it.
Hi, this is Bruce Shooter here with the Mental Health Warrior Program, which is at bruceshooter.com. And we are here at Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith for show number 2, reminding you to become a mental health warrior.
See? You kicked its ass and called it Sally. Good job.
Excellent.
All right, let me hit stop. I'll be right back.
Okay, yep.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Dara McKinley, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Yeah, I always have that moment of, now I know how to say her first name, but I forgot what her last name is.
like what the mountain used to be called, or the ex-president, McKinley.
Okay, McKinley. Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. McKinley. Dara McKinley. Okay, so you are at howtoforgive.com. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in your business today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to help people forgive, especially people who identify as spiritual but not religious.
Okay.
Because I, over the years, have come to see, I identify as spiritual but not religious.
Right.
And so over the years, I have come to see through my own forgiveness journey and through lots of conversations and working with people, helping them to forgive, that this demographic really doesn't have the wiring for how we understand forgiveness in the mainstream, which is that it's one's ability to pardon, cease being angry, have compassion, and let go of the past. And those definitions, I've read a lot of stories of people who've survived atrocities and, horrible things that swear that pardoning set them free. And I believe these people. I believe that pardoning does work for a certain group of people, because right. It's obviously this mainstream definition, and people have gotten past atrocities and lived long, beautiful lives from pardoning.
Okay.
But there's another group of people that I like to describe it that we just don't have the wiring, whatever that wiring is. It just doesn't exist in us.
Yeah. Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's huge to say, like, have this discussion, right? So when I saw your information, I was like, that's an easy one, because it's like, to me, like one of the, like you can use the concept of forgiveness for so many different, like for others, but more importantly for me is how I like to think about it. Like if I'm carrying around old grudges, that's not helping me. Like that person that like hurt me, they don't even think about me.
Right.
I'm thinking about them every day. It's like, why am I doing that? So
right. So one of the ways that I've come to understand it, because we use the word forgive, like
so many,
it's so
ways.
embedded relationally, like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. Oh, don't worry, I forgive you, or, in marriages, something really intense happens. Oh, I forgave him and we're going to have a new beginning. So we use it relationally, like all the time. And it's really beautiful, like it's used in a lot of beautiful, healthy ways. And so I call that like interpersonal forgiveness.
Okay.
And then there's intrapersonal forgiveness, which is really just about like setting yourself free from.
Yeah. That's what I was just talking about. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big deal. Yeah. Put that down.
Yeah.
Don't.
But a lot of people like get confused because interpersonal forgiveness is so kind of the mainstream thing.
Right.
A lot of people get tripped up that like it's I have to forgive this person who did this horrible thing to me, and that's the So anyway, I'm trying to bring like a lot of clarity and I think like everybody's gonna have their own takeaway, and whatever you think, that's good, right?
but it's important to talk about it, right? To have the discussion and give it space, give it
Right.
more space so you can like take some of the heat off of those sort of ideas and in the past, right?
Right.
And just
Right.
look at it like objectively. My current strategy isn't working because I'm bothered by this still. And it happened years ago, right?
Right. Right. And that
Right.
exact thought is what put me on the path.
Okay.
Was that like, oh my God,
I'm still carrying this around.
I have been having the same thought for 3 years, and
Yeah.
it's getting me nowhere,
Right. That
and so
doesn't
I
work.
need
I need a new
how do I
strategy.
get off this track,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is Vroom Vroom Veer. Let's go back in time. You already told me you grew up in New York. So what was New York like for you growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in the North Bronx, New York, and I grew up to, I was in a family. My mother's from the island of Puerto Rico. My dad was Scotch Irish. This is a very common combination in New
Okay.
York.
Okay.
And my father was atheist, and my mom was agnostic, and she grew up in a very strong Catholic family, and she was the youngest of 10, and she was a seeker and a questioner, and so she would question the teachings that she was getting, and she would be
Gotcha.
reprimanded for it. And
Oh,
so
wow.
she had a lot of resentment for the fact that she couldn't openly question and have discussions, like you're saying, about what she was learning. So she raised my sister and I specifically to be seekers on our own,
Right.
and there was a lot
That's
of
great.
Catholic aunts and uncles orbiting us saying, you need to get them confirmed, you need to get them in Sunday school.
Yeah.
And she was very protective and said, no, 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 these two kids are going to decide for themselves what they believe.
Lucky.
And today,
lucky.
I
That's a blessing.
went on
Yeah.
to be I was born a very spiritual little girl, and to the point where I actually wanted the religion, because I thought, wow, if something can explain to me this feeling that I have, this spiritual feeling that I feel like I was born with,
Right.
bring it on. I want to know.
Sure.
Anyway, but I went on to be a seeker who definitely dabbled more in alternative spirituality, alternative to the United States.
Okay.
And I'm so grateful that she raised me like that.
Yeah, you got lucky.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I was brought up Lutheran. So Lutheran, if you don't know, is like Catholic light. It's very much like Catholicism without like, I think pretty much the only difference is like pastors and can get married and have kids, that. Whereas priests, not so much, right? But
Yeah.
outside of that, it's pretty much down the line the same. It seemed like to me. I've never done Catholic, so I don't really know that, but it seemed like that, It wasn't really for me. It was more of teachers that brought me around to thinking outside of just that one little box of, well, this is, okay, sure. If you're not like a Lutheran, Protestants are okay. Catholics are probably okay. Pretty much all Christians are okay. We just need to save everybody else. That was sort of like what, like the training from the churches from. So I did, what do they call it? Like catechism and all of those. And I got confirmed, and I was a really good acolyte. It wasn't until I had like teachers in high school who, like teach you philosophy and teach you about Buddhism and teach you about other ways of looking at spirituality that like kind of blew my mind. It was
Wow.
like, wow, and then I would talk about it with like, Catholics and Lutherans, and they'd be like, I don't want to talk about it. They weren't like beating you up or anything. Right. I didn't get any like negative sort of, other than the fact that they were just like, I know what I know, and I'm going to keep going to church. So you do you, and I was like, okay, cool.
So how do you identify today?
Probably that spiritual, not religious.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear
like,
we are a growing population.
Yeah, I think
Spiritual but not religious.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to just let go. Like, have you ever heard of Jack Kornfield?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jack Kornfield told this story about, I can't remember who he was talking about, but he said like to deal with this mystery of what it is to be human, you either need like a really big story, insert your big story here, all the religions, right? Or nothing at all. Or no story at all, right? So I was trying to sit in the space of no story at all. It just doesn't, you're making shit up as you go. So I don't know. I liked all of the stuff that like Wayne Dyer and Ram Dass and Deepak Chopra. I'm leaning now again towards like looking at like just straight on Buddhism as really cool, like stripped away of almost all of the stuff that you can get mad at Buddhism for. What I like about it is like a really good Buddhist teacher said, like, you can't break Buddhism. If you bring it back down to like just what the Buddha said, it's like a pamphlet and you can't hurt it. Your teacher will give you a hammer and nails and whatever you want to try to do to break the philosophy of, it's not really a philosophy, the belief system of Buddhism. They'll help you, right? They'll be like, yeah, I'm with you. Let's go. Let's tear this down and see what we do. So to me, that makes it attractive because it seems like anti-fragile. The more you try to attack it and damage it, it gets better and stronger.
Isn't that cool? I love that. I love that. Yeah. I studied Buddhism for about 6 years, very seriously.
Yeah.
Even my degree is in Buddhist psychology.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I have a huge appreciation for Buddhism. So what are you reading these days? Are you reading anything? You don't have to be reading
I'm not
anything.
reading
Yeah.
anything these
Have
days.
you heard of the book Thoughts About a Thinker?
No.
That's so in terms of like the stripped down,
Right.
like take away and all the colors and sparkles and all of that and just get right to the nitty gritty. That's a really cool book if you ever want to.
I might check it out. Say the title again.
Thoughts About a Thinker.
And who wrote it?
I can't remember.
Don't worry
at the
about
moment,
it.
But you'll find it. I just
Google
remember
exists.
like
Thoughts About a Thinker. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember just loving one of the books. You just don't want it to end. Loving every word. Yeah.
So I recently found this guy. Oh shoot! Now I can never remember a name. I think his name was David Nichtern, and he's like a meditation instructor for this crazy comedian. And now I have to remember his name too. Duncan Trotter, I think. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No.
So do you have Netflix?
Yeah.
So check out this thing called Midnight Gospel.
Oh, okay. I love it.
On Netflix. Yes,
Okay.
you're right. And he's got a podcast, Duncan Trotter does, and his Buddhist meditation teacher is David Nichtern. So he's the guy that did the line about you can't break the stripped down version of Buddhism, right? Like the thing that always bothered me was the meritocracy idea, if that makes any sense. Like you're working in this life to gain merit in some other life. And I was always like, well, I lose that. I can't win that game. I'm not big at like, shopping for merit, But anyway, let's move on. So you grow up in New York. And so I want to get into the origin story of what was the event that got you to come up with this idea of, I don't know how to forgive. I don't even, So
in the early 2000s, I'm studying spirituality and psychology. As soon as I start to, enter the university, I start studying psychology and then alternative spirituality. And I can't get enough. I always want to learn. I always want to study more. So I am doing this and I have an idea for a business and I partner up with, incompatible business partners.
Okay.
So,
I've heard this story before. Okay.
Yes, I'm sure you have. Right? It is the human condition. Yeah, it is it is the human condition to get tangled up in the wrong relationship and have to figure your way out. So,
True.
the business takes off and we kind of endure each other for as long as we can because we have this successful business, even
Oh,
though,
wow.
we're incompatible. And then eventually everything falls apart and I lose my share of the business.
Ooh,
And at the time, I'm half relieved because I want to be free of these relationships, and
right,
I'm half heartbroken. And the stakes were low because a lot of people have this story that I'm saying right now, and the stakes were super high. So it's
right,
like devastating financially, in addition to just the loss.
right.
For me, the stakes were low. So I was really given this lesson in like a soft way,
Okay.
except the emotional stakes were really high. It was my idea. I kind of like,
Yeah.
I was the
Emotionally a
mastermind
wreck.
behind the
Yes.
whole thing. Yeah. So I think, at this point, I have 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind me. So I'm like, okay, I know how to process my emotions, focus on the good, lean into my significant relationships, recreate my life, appreciate the present moment. I'm going to do all this. I'm going to move forward. And 3 years later, I still have this negative narrative looping through my head. And
Right.
um, grateful to my Buddhist education, which taught me to pay attention to my thoughts, right? So I can
Okay.
actually like see this thing happening in my head as I'm like doing the laundry. It's just there. And
Yeah.
so as I'm noticing that, I suddenly start sliding into a mystery illness, which is, has fatigue, anxiety, insomnia. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me. And I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so I start freaking out that something is seriously wrong with me.
Okay.
And, I just become very concerned for my kids. And, as I said, I'm born spiritual. I'm a very spiritual person, from my earliest memories. And so I would never call myself psychic, but I'm very intuitive. And when you hit these rock bottom moments, like I have the ability, I think most people have this ability that you can really get an intuitive message in these moments. So that's what I went for. I was, needed guidance. And so I just kind of had this down on my knees, like, universe, whatever is out there, I need help. Like, I need you to tell me what my next step forward is. I'm freaked out to my core and I start making deals. Whatever you tell me, I will do.
Ooh.
Whatever it is.
Ooh.
And,
Ooh. Ouch.
but that's like a very, normal, desperate plea,
Sure.
right? So, and I get the message back to forgive. And I remember at the time, I knew I had something to forgive by, mainstream definition. And the message annoyed me. I didn't want to, I'd already
That's perfect. Yes. Been there, done that. I know those.
right,
Yes.
like I felt like I had already lost this huge thing. There was something about the word give. It felt like I was giving more. It felt
Right.
like I was letting these people off the hook. I had all the resistance that I know so many people have when they come up against this moment.
Right.
And so, but the message was so strong that I thought, okay, I can follow directions. It was 2012. I was like, let me Google how to forgive. Let me find the person who wrote the 5 steps to forgiving, and I can follow these steps and see what happens. Like,
Yes.
I'm a
Give
very
me a
open
to-do list.
person.
Yes.
Yeah, give me a to-do list. I will follow it. I'll give this a shot. And so I Google how to forgive, and 99.999% of what came up was why a person should forgive. And then the little bit that I could find on how, and it was like on a forum, someone like me going, but how do you do it? Like
Right.
begging.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, but wait, like, and the response back was, you just do it. And so
That's not a way. Just that's not a
right,
way.
right.
No.
And I didn't
That's a
have the
Nike
wiring.
logo. That
That's a Nike, that's a Nike
slogan.
logo.
Yes.
That's a Nike
Just
logo.
do it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I was like, wow, I'm on my own here. Like, there is no 5 step, list
Right.
of, I'm sure there is today, but in 2012 there wasn't. So I thought, oh wow, okay. So Dara, you have 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind you.
Right.
You need a step by step. Like, you can do this. Figure out a step by
You
step.
might need to
And
blaze a path here. You're doing some
For
pathfinding.
myself,
Yes.
for myself. Like I wasn't
You're
like, I was just
scratching
trying to
your
get myself
own
out of this
itch.
hole,
Yes.
you know, like I was in a hole and I was trying to
Yeah.
get myself out. And I was very motivated because of my kids and
Right.
having this illness. So,
Okay, this is fun.
where
So
a lot
now-
of people like
Yeah.
might come to this moment and be like, you know, like I came to this moment and was like, I really need to figure this out.
Sure.
So my first question to myself that stepped me onto the path was, okay, I've had this negative, resentful narrative looping in my head for the last 3 years. What is the opposite of having this narrative?
Ooh, yeah.
And my
Katie
answer,
Byron. There you go.
right. Well, I don't know if Katie would I don't know what she would say about my answer to that question, but
That's
my
okay.
answer to the question, maybe she actually, I think Katie might get on board
Well,
with my answer.
Katie always says, whatever you're thinking, rewind it and ask yourself the opposite. So that's called the turn, right? For her, it's like I'm thinking this. What's the opposite of that? That's Katie. It's one of her magic tricks.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I knew the
Sorry.
I knew the is it true, you know, and then she would ask again, is it true?
Right.
You know, you'd
When
ask
you
yourself
get down
twice.
to that tree, right? What if the opposite was true? Is somewhere in there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I asked myself the opposite. And the answer that came to me was like, I would bless this whole situation with the highest love.
There you go.
And that
Right.
was my first step.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
It's a really good answer.
Thank you.
Where do you
It worked.
Where do you find that love? That would be like, where did you find the love to give to that? Yeah.
Right. So when I describe myself as a very spiritual little girl,
Yeah.
what if you get nitty gritty about what that actually was, I feel like I was born with a felt sense of unconditional love.
Oh,
And
nice.
so when I asked myself that question as an adult and got that answer, I very easily was able to reach for this feeling that I've been walking around with my entire life of
Gotcha.
unconditional love. And so, you know, one of the things, this is kind of one of the first things I teach people in the course is how to access one's embodied sense of unconditional love. Because a lot of people talk about unconditional love. Buddhism talks about unconditional love. And it's so like great and easy in theory and in words, but
People
like where the rubber
really
hits,
struggle with that. Right.
yeah, and where the rubber hits the road is like, where do you feel it in your body? Because
Yes.
once you have a felt sense of it, then you actually can use that. I teach people like that's a medicine. That's a free medicine right there.
Totally.
That you can apply to things. I was listening to one of your podcasts and I heard you talk about, I'm not sure what the context was, but it made me think of, you know, I help people see where unconditional love, which to me is a spiritual love that works through us and for us. And so for me, as I said, it was right there, you know, when I needed to grab it. But for a lot of people, it comes via the family system, or it comes via one's passions, or through one's creativity. Or one thing you just said in the podcast I was listening to was feeling it in nature.
Yes.
That like that you just have this, and it's a peaceful love. It's not like
Right.
it's not joy. It's not
No.
you know. It's
very
not like a jumping up.
calm. Right.
Right. Very all encompassing.
Yes.
Very calm.
It's like
this
a love like the sun. It's like it's not judging anything. It's just like the sun doesn't judge at all.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Hallelujah.
Right.
Preach it, sing it.
Yeah. I get it. Yes. That so
Right.
the metaphor of sun love is goes back. So it's great. Yes, because the sun doesn't judge. It just shines.
Right. So when we have a huge rupture in our life, or what some people would call betrayal or loss, or just this something that's sticking with us, it's like I help people like, how do you unite that thing that happened, which is now just an energy in the body, right? Because we're in the present moment. So these things that happened in the past are living in us, you know, via an experience in our bodies. How do we unite that with unconditional love? And
Wow.
what
Oh, yeah.
happens when we bring these two forces together over a consistent period of time?
Mm. I love it. So, like,
Cool.
yeah, I mean, I would say, like, for me, I just went through this thing where I just found like a new fun thing to do, right? So I got a new little toy to play video games on. And I
Hmm.
had been like kind of like meh on video games for a very long time, right?
Hmm.
Just because I didn't find one. I actually bought a bunch of video games because I was like bored. I was like, maybe I can find a new fun game, right?
Hmm.
And then I find this game and I love it.
Hmm.
And for like, I don't know, a month or more, I'm just like, all I want to do is play this game when I have time, right?
Hmm.
And then somewhere in the back of somewhere, creeping around in my psyche, right? I'm feeling this like, watch out, careful, right? And then just like last week, right? I'm laying in bed and I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm listening to my sleepy music and fading out. And I have this image in my head of like, oh yeah, there's that big black thing that I'm ignoring that I know is going to punch me and steal all my shit. And I'm like,
Is this the video game?
and I'm ignoring it, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I'll be okay. And yes, I woke up this morning and I'm like, oh yes, that is the video game that's taking me down the road to darkness. It's like you put down
Right,
one addiction and
right.
you put down one addiction and you go, now I have this so much more time. What should I do? I'll get addicted to a new
Oh,
thing, you
right.
know? Yeah, yeah.
The 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 distractions are
Yes.
mind-blowing today. They're off the charts.
Nothing wrong with video games. You just have to be careful. You don't, especially when you're getting off of one habit. Don't pick up a new one.
Right. Right.
Any
For the first time I'm living that right now. I'm in a huge transition and I
okay.
can see myself like, oh, I could start paying attention. And I'm just like, nope, nope. I'm going to be with this transition in all its, wild ups and downs, and I am not throwing myself into some huge distraction.
Good for
So,
you.
and I'm 53, and this is the first time I'm being like super intentional about not doing that. Normally, like the distractions would have taken me away.
Sure. Yeah, they're great. Anyway, so let's get into like all the different words, right? Because I know people like close people like that just really struggle with the yeah, I'm not forgiving that person, right?
Hmm.
And these
Hmm.
people are like the folks that say they're Christians,
Hmm.
you know, right? And I
Hmm.
know everybody knows all about Christianity and it's all about forgiveness, but they
Hmm.
don't want to do that. So let's talk about like why you think folks struggle so much with this forgiveness, because it's such a
Yeah.
loaded word and it's like there's justice involved and there's like transgression and crime and all these things that come into it. But why do we struggle so much when, we profess to
Well, I
forgive
think
like God
we're
and Jesus
logical
and
beings,
right.
and our logical minds are, intentionally developed in the Western world, from when we're wee ones. And and then we've also been given this definition that it's pardoning, it's excusing the crappy behavior of another person, and who wants to do that?
I wouldn't want to do that. No.
Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting because here I've been on this path now since 2012 is when I discovered forgiveness for myself, and then after having a lot of meaningful conversations over the following years, I started teaching it in 2014. So I've been doing this for about 10 years, and quite honestly, I love this idea of pardoning in theory. I mean, who doesn't love, the idea in theory? But like when you're actually up against something huge, I will, very honestly say it pardoning does not make sense to me. And I am into healing and I am into
Right.
making amends, but I'm into accountability. I
Totally.
think
Yes.
holding people accountable is actually, and I'm not saying like blame, like I actually want to very distinguish this. Like blame and accountability, like blame has a lot of unprocessed energy behind it.
Right. It
And
includes,
accountability,
yeah.
go ahead.
It includes like blame is a loaded word that means responsible and deserve punishment.
Right. And
Right.
accountability is just the facts.
Right. Just facts. There's
Yeah.
cold. It's just like you
It's
did
just what
this.
happened.
You did that.
It's,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just what
You
happened.
can't
And I
deny
think,
that. Right. You did that.
right,
Yes.
right. And I think it's really healthy to be accountable and to hold people accountable.
Right.
And like that's how humanity learns and moves forwards and how we become better versions, better humans is
Totally.
through accountability, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So when people come up, but then here we have this definition of pardoning, ceasing anger, letting go, and having compassion. And this definition is huge. Like I'm going up against uh, a belief system in the Western mind
Right.
right now
Right.
that
Right.
is so deeply embedded. When
Right.
people come to my course, almost they could spend the first few weeks just wrestling with detangling from this definition they've heard their entire lives.
It's deeper than like most people think because it goes back all the way to like the first written book was the Bible, right? And that
Right.
Old Testament is where all that programming really comes from, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's awesome that I married a Japanese woman because like Japanese people kind of like they know about the Bible, right? But they're not like they don't have that ingrained generational. Yes,
Epigenetics.
exactly. They've got their own shit, which is crazy in and of itself. I
But
don't
they
think
don't have Christian
they don't have
epigenetics.
Exactly. They don't have the Judeo-Christian shit that we don't even know we know, right?
Right.
To the point where like Japanese movies, have you ever seen like a Japanese version of a movie that became like The Ring in Japan is completely different from The Ring in the States?
Oh, really?
Because with Japanese ethos, you don't have to be a bad person to get shit happening to you. It's like,
Yeah.
oops, stepped in evil.
Right.
Now
right.
I'm dead, right?
Right. Right.
Whereas like every kind of horror genre kind of thing is embedded with, in order for you to get killed in a slasher movie, you have to drink or have sex or do something, a little bit mischievous. But then
Interesting.
you
This is
deserve it.
fascinating.
Then
Yeah.
you deserve it, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
So like
Yeah.
Japanese horror doesn't translate well. They have to rewrite it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
That is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I think about my ability to differentiate from the pardoning definition, I think about how my mother raised me, and I'm very grateful about that. And I think about the fact that she is Puerto Rican, and yes, like the island of Puerto Rico has experienced immense amount of what we're now coining,
Right.
Christian epigenetics.
Sure.
But it doesn't go back, it only goes back 500 years. It doesn't go back 2,000 years,
Okay.
which
Right.
is, where it goes back. But I think a lot of people, healing is finally having its day. That word is finally having its day. And
Right.
people really do want to liberate themselves from past stuff, especially people who are later in life and are doing life reviews. Like they really
Right.
are just like, I would love to go back to the maker, clear and not holding all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Totally. Right.
So it's an exciting time to invite people to reevaluate their understanding about what forgiveness is at its essence. Because I do think once you have this, develop this skill of merging unconditional love with whatever it is that you would like to forgive,
Wow.
pardoning, ceasing anger, letting go, and having compassion are actually these kind of like organic potential
They
outcomes
just
of it
sort of
all.
start happening, right?
Right. Because you just don't, you're not holding the grudge anymore. So it's kind of like, oh, yeah, pardoning, sure. Like I don't
Right.
I don't care anymore.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about like how you find that, like when I think about like some stuff that I held on to for a long time, when I would try to feel it in my body, I would just get mad. Right. It's like, okay, how do I work with that? Right.
Right.
So
So
where did you start?
So this is another important thing that I teach people right out of the gate is that uh, the brain has two hemispheres. One is the logical,
Yeah.
executive functioning part of the brain, and one is the right hemisphere, which you can call like the spiritual part of the brain. And one of the best ways to discern them is that the left hemisphere is responsible for navigating our experience with the external world, and the right hemisphere is responsible for navigating our experience with the internal world.
That's a really good
And
one. I hadn't heard that
yeah,
one yet. That's good.
yeah, thank
Makes
you.
sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm very spiritual and I'm very practical.
Right.
And I want spirituality, to have two legs and walk. So, and again, as I mentioned earlier, from the gate, we're developing the left hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere of the brain, like, is almost
It's on
atrophied in
its
Western
own. It's
culture.
on its
It's on
own.
its own. Yeah. So, but it's waiting to be used. This is why I
Right.
say we're anatomically designed to forgive. Like this part
Yeah.
of our brain
Yeah.
actually has the abilities for forgiveness. We just have to, ignite it and get it going and work those muscles again.
Right.
So, and so one of the traits of this part of the brain is emotional intelligence.
Right. Yes.
And so this is another thing I teach people because what you're describing right now is that if people don't see the emotional realm like for what it is and what it needs and how to take care of it, that those emotions will thwart the forgiveness process,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
if
Right.
you
Right.
go to forgive and you just keep smacking up against anger, it's not going to go anywhere,
Right.
but
That's because
and I
that's
again, like
basically the only lever you've got to work with is anger. Now you have to. It's like, ugh, I'm trying to learn how to forgive. Now I have to learn how to deal with anger. Like work with anger.
right.
So now I have to Google something else. Jeez. How? Right.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that anger, has a lot of wisdom. It's not a bad thing. It's actually, trying to do a lot of good things that it thinks you need. But it's like, how do you disarm it or dismantle it or kind of like move it out of the way so that the forgiveness process can flow? Because another way I'm trying to get people to fill their bodies with unconditional love. And if their bodies are full of anger or fear or whatever, it's not the unconditional love isn't going to penetrate as deeply as it could as if people move it. So here's another thing I do is like I try to I want people to see that taking care of their emotional world is kind of like as basic and mundane and normal and as brushing your teeth, right? It's just this
Right.
this realm that we have that we just need to tend to. And
Right.
when we tend to it, great things happen. And when we ignore
True.
it, it builds and festers and
Right.
just, becomes this unnecessary pain in the ass in our lives.
Right. Yeah. I feel lucky that like, I think the doorway for me, I don't know about you, but was just like breathing meditation, right? Like trying to just practice that on a regular basis.
Right. And those things
Yeah.
actually illuminate the right hemisphere of the brain. That's why they feel
Right.
so good. Like
Yeah.
once we surrender into them, it's
Sitting
like,
out in
oh, like,
nature, just
wow.
like, yes, sitting out in
Nature is
nature.
super right hemisphere of the brain. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
And just like, but I would have never like had that moment where I'm drifting off to sleep. And then I see this dark thing looming in the corner that I know I'm ignoring. That would have never happened. I would have just gotten beat up, right? So sometimes like past work on this kind of thing, like, if somebody that is struggling with forgiveness, this is what I wanted to say. Like say somebody committed a crime against a family member, right? I wouldn't want that person to go like get a pardon from the president.
Right.
If they really did it, I want them to have their day in court. And if they're found guilty, then they should go get punished. And I can forgive them.
Right. You can clear the damage that they have created, from your body.
Right.
And
not for them. Not for them. It's not. I'm not forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them for me.
for you, you know, and it's, there's a lot of secondary benefits of forgiveness. Inner peace is like the numero uno one.
Sure.
But it uncovers intuition. We're all intuitive beings. It makes our intuition a lot clearer, and it makes and it connects us to the higher perspective of it all.
Right.
So
right.
And that's a nice way to live, right?
Totally. Yes. Yes.
So it's like when and I'm well aware that like really intense things happen, like people are born into families with severe mental illness,
right.
Like people are up against like very strong, in Buddhism, what you would say dharmas, right? Or karmas, like they very, very strong paths. And we are all anatomically designed to regenerate and to connect with a higher perspective and to walk an intuitive path. And you do want people to experience the consequences of their horrible choices and to learn
because they need to learn those lessons.
And to not perpetuate it again, and to understand the severity of the things that they have done. Like that's kind of an important experience to have in life if you've chosen a horrible action.
Right.
Again, it's like that person. And so here's like an interesting point. I don't believe that person getting the justice that they deserve, even though I think getting the justice they deserve, like definitely helps. Like we're still going to have to deal with our own stuff.
Totally. Yes, for sure. Right. Right. But I mean, I've seen like, now we're all into these true crime documentaries that we binge.
I've never seen one, so enlighten me.
Well, okay, sure. But I would say the more common person is the person that says, I will never forgive them. Right? That's unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is like, and at the same time, when you do get that unicorn that says, oh yes, I forgive this person, right? And they're hugging them and they're kissing them and they said, I know you blah, blah, blah. Like they're literally forgiving them. Now they still want justice, but they're forgiving them. And the audience is mad at that person for forgiving them, So how do we get past that? That's, I guess, your job to teach us how we get like those 99 people to figure it out. Yeah.
So it's like, that whole scenario is very embedded in the pardoning definition, like this person got pardoned and it's pardoning others' transgressions. That is what forgiveness is. And, I describe it more as healing. And to me, it's like, fine, you're right. What happened on this true crime episode is horrific. This person deserves to go to jail for life. True. It's like, and do you want to live with
carrying around
the rupture or the emotional burden that this whole thing has created?
The
or
anger,
do you
the
want
hate, the confusion? Do you want to keep carrying
or do you want to
around?
clear your body and mind of that? And you're never going to forget it, right? It's always going to like influence you going forward. But do you want to be at peace with it and be a newer version of yourself?
Yeah.
Have a new beginning.
Right.
I love to describe forgiveness as a new beginning.
Like I went through this thing. I think I just mentioned this, like it keeps coming up, but I had like a regret from my days in the Air Force where I made kind of a big mistake that like made a lot of people mad. And the funny thing is, in retrospect, was I saw it coming, right? But I held on to that regret from like whenever it happened, like 2007 until like a couple years ago, right? Because I didn't really know how to figure out like what to do about that, right? And I think what I did was I forgave myself for screwing up.
Right on. Well, how did you, so that, I mean, so meaning that you like, can you like get a
Yes,
little more
I
detailed
can.
about what you did?
What I would say that worked was go back and figure out what I should have done. So, right. And had I done that, then everything would have been peachy, right? So there was like a couple of things, couple of moments where I could have Band-Aid fixed it and not gotten in trouble, and the shit would have been just as bad, but not on me. That was like, oh, I discovered that. Okay. Had I just gone and like at the witching hour saying, we screwed up and we have to do this, right? At least it wouldn't have been my fault, but damage still done. How's that sound, right? But if I would have like gone back 6 months earlier and actually done my job and prepared, none of it would have went wrong.
So you got down and dirty. You got down and dirty and like processed the whole thing from many different angles so that you could finally be like, okay, like I made a mistake and now it's time for me to let this go. Yeah, that's hot.
Yeah. That works.
And that worked. Yeah.
Now
totally.
when I think of that regret, I go, yeah, I know what I should have done. Right. And it's not this big pile of beat up myself.
Right. And so, and you bring up a good point. And this is kind of one of my favorite things about forgiveness, as I teach it. And I love your story right now. Is that the thought of like, pardoning these people, when I first stepped onto the path, that whole story with the business, the thought of pardoning them, like, made me recoil. I couldn't get it. And then once I realized, I was like, oh, I actually need to bless them with the highest love. And, as I mentioned, it was kind of an easy thing for me to put together because of just how I'm wired.
That's a thing to do, but you're not done yet. Right. I mean, you can bless them.
What I loved about it was that I didn't have to love them.
Yes.
I was like, I don't have to love them.
You don't have to start there. You just go, look, I've got this flashlight. It's God's love.
Right. Exactly. And I feel like that's like another big like asset to the forgiveness process. I teach people that forgiveness is a delegation. That it's an enlistment of unconditional love. It's not your ability to love unconditionally. It's your ability to enlist unconditional love.
Just give
it. One of the most famous stories as a ex-Lutheran that you might have heard, tell me if you've heard the story, that when Jesus was on the cross and he's being crucified, he looks up and says, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
I know that story.
You know that story, right? Yes. So it's one of the most famous forgiveness stories.
I took all of those to heart when I was a kid. I really did. And I was shocked that no one else did.
Yeah, I can tell that you did. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so many people cite that story because here he is, like in his final moments, totally walking his talk and pardoning the guys who are murdering him.
Yes.
What I love about that story, though, is that he actually didn't. He delegated. He looked up and said, hey, can you forgive these guys?
I'm having a hard time with this sword in my belly.
Right, exactly. And I feel like when we have ruptures, the emotions are so strong
Right.
that
That's a really good
that's
delegation.
all we can carry in
Right.
those moments. And then now we're supposed to miraculously love unconditionally in those
Yes.
moments. So I love that story illuminates that, oh no, it's actually the ability. It's very AA. I think this is a huge
Totally
teaching in
AA.
AA. It's
Yes.
the
The higher power
ability
is doing the
right, is
forgiving.
to
Yes.
enlist the higher power to say like, okay, I'm at capacity right now, but I know something, or I have a connection to something, or I know how to access something that can help me out.
That just made sense to me now. So wow, good for you.
Thank you.
Dara's
Thank
a
you
good
for the
teacher. Wow. I can't handle
that means a ton. That means
I
a ton.
can't handle this, God. I need a little unconditional forgiveness and love because I ain't got it. So
I ain't got it.
I ain't
got it. I'm full of whatever
Maybe
I'm
we'll
full
get
of.
there later, but
Yeah.
I need a little of that juice.
Right, exactly. Mhm.
Wow, good stuff.
Cool.
So okay, we've been talking almost an hour. It went so quick.
Wow. Yeah. So it was a lovely conversation.
It was. So you are at howtoforgive.com. So
Howtoforgive.com. That's what I typed in. That fateful night in 2012 was how to forgive. And so that's my domain, howtoforgive.com.
You're lucky to get it. It's a great one. And
I felt very blessed to get it. Yeah.
and you've got an endless supply of clients.
Yes. Betrayal, disappointment, ruptures.
just go
it's
watch some
universal,
Netflix.
people. It's part of the deal. Yeah.
Learning how. Wow. And it's not just do it. Huh. Dara, this has been a blast. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
All right. I'm going to stop the show. Just don't hang up.
Okay.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to veered.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.